All right, so are you ready to dive into something really different this time?
Always up for an adventure. What have you got for us?
Okay, so we're going to be looking at excerpts from something called the Library of the Sons Aumen Israel.
Library of the Sons Aumen Israel. Never heard of it.
Yeah, it's pretty obscure, but that's what makes it so interesting.
True. So what's this library all about?
Well, from what I can gather, it's like someone took Mormonism
Okay, I'm listening.
and then threw in ancient philosophy, Egyptian mysticism, alchemy.
Whoa. Slow down. That's a lot to process.
I know, right? It's like a greatest hits of esoteric traditions all rolled into one.
And you want us to unpack all of that?
That's the plan. We're going to try to make sense of this library, understand its core ideas, and figure out how it all fits together.
Ambitious. I like it. Where do we even begin with something this eclectic?
Well, the first thing that jumped out at me was this idea of becoming God. It's like a central theme throughout the text.
Becoming God. Okay, now that definitely grabs my attention. That's not exactly a common theme you come across every day.
Right. And it's not just hinted at either. This text really leans into it, like it's a given.
Interesting. So it's not just talking about being godly or living a moral life. It's suggesting humans can actually become gods.
Yeah, it seems that way. And this is where those Mormon roots really come into play.
Mormon roots, you say? So this is connected to Mormonism in some way?
Oh, absolutely. There are references to Joseph Smith, the concept of a church of the firstborn.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. I'm starting to see how those pieces might fit.
And there are even mentions of specific Mormon scriptures, both the sealed and unsealed portions.
Sealed portions. Now, for those of us who might not be Mormonism scholars, what exactly does that mean?
Ah, good point. So basically, in Mormonism, sealed portions of Scripture are believed to contain deeper, more sacred teachings.
I see. Sort of like hidden chapters or secret knowledge revealed only to a select few.
Exactly. Which makes sense, considering how this text seems to be all about uncovering hidden layers of knowledge.
So it's not just drawing from Mormonism, it's delving into some of its more esoteric aspects. Fascinating.
And speaking of esoteric, have you noticed how this text talks about 7 soul bodies?
7 soul bodies. Okay, you've definitely piqued my curiosity now. That's a new one on me.
Right. It's not your average Sunday school lesson. It's like, forget one soul. We've got a whole crew in here.
So not just one soul, but 7. What exactly are these soul bodies and what are they doing in there?
Well, that's what we need to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like each soul body has a specific function, and they all need to be developed or toned up, as the text puts it, for spiritual advancement.
Toned up. It's like we're talking about a spiritual gym routine for your soul. So what, we each have 7 spiritual six-packs we need to work on?
Something like that.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is how this concept of 7 soul bodies connects to other traditions, like the idea of chakras in yoga or Egyptian magical practices.
Oh, now that's intriguing. So we're seeing a blending of different spiritual traditions here. But the question is, why go through the trouble of weaving together such a complex tapestry?
That is the question. What's the motivation behind it all?
It's like the author wanted to create a spiritual system that drew upon the wisdom of multiple traditions. But to what end?
Right. What's the larger point?
Perhaps the answer lies somewhere within the text itself. Maybe if we keep digging, we'll find some clues.
Okay, so speaking of clues, there's this story in the text about Zarathustra Havovi.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So in this story, the king wants Zarathustra Havovi to explain some profound wisdom to him. But the king, he's impatient.
Impatient kings, never a good sign.
Right. He wants the easy answer, the quick takeaway. But Zarathustra Havovi, he's like, nope, you're not going to find deep wisdom like that. He tells the king to look at a single grain of wheat.
A grain of wheat. It seems a little underwhelming for a king.
That's what the king thinks. But Zarathustra Havovi, he's like, look closer. There's a whole universe of knowledge hidden within this one tiny grain.
Ah, I see. It's about looking beyond the surface, searching for the deeper meaning hidden within things.
Exactly. And I think that story perfectly encapsulates the spirit of this whole text. It's telling us, don't expect easy answers. Real understanding takes effort. It takes a willingness to dig deeper.
So we're being challenged to be like Zarathustra Havovi, to look for the hidden wisdom within this library of the Sons Aumen Israel. I like it. It's a challenge I'm willing to accept.
Me too. But speaking of hidden wisdom, did I tell you about the part where Jesus is frequently kissing Mary Magdalene?
Hold on. Jesus is doing what? No, that is something I did not see coming.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. The text mentions this non-canonical gospel where Jesus is constantly kissing Mary Magdalene, much to the dismay of his disciples.
A non-canonical gospel. So we're talking about texts that are outside the traditional biblical canon.
Exactly. And apparently in this particular gospel, Jesus is very affectionate with Mary Magdalene.
Well, that certainly adds a whole new dimension to their relationship. It definitely makes you wonder about the text's perspective on women and their role in spiritual authority. Is it challenging traditional views, embracing alternative narratives?
It's definitely something to think about.
There's also this really interesting take on the prodigal son parable.
Oh, yeah. That was a good one. What did you make of that?
Well, instead of just being a story about forgiveness, this text reframes the son's riotous living as the sins of humanity. The debt he racks up becomes symbolic of disease, and the father's forgiveness represents divine healing. It's like taking a familiar story and giving it a whole new layer of meaning.
Right. And it all ties back to this idea of transformation, of actively working towards a more divine state of being.
Which, of course, brings us back to the whole becoming God concept. It's like this thread that connects everything in this text.
Totally. But it does make you wonder, who is this path really designed for? Who is the intended audience for a text like this?
That's a great question. I mean, based on what we've seen so far, it seems like it would require a certain type of seeker, someone who's drawn to, let's say, unconventional spiritual paths.
Yeah, someone who's not afraid of a little mystery, a little esoteric knowledge. Definitely not your average self-help book.
Not by a long shot, but that's what makes it so fascinating, right?
Totally. Okay, so before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's circle back to these 7 soul bodies. I think it's time we really try to understand what they are and how they fit into this whole becoming godlike equation.
You know, it's funny when you think about it, most people, when they think of a soul, they think of something kind of vague and singular, right?
Right, like this ethereal wisp that floats around.
Exactly. But this library is like, one soul is not nearly enough to work with. 7 soul bodies is what we're talking about here.
7. It's giving me multiple personality vibes, only soul edition.
Well, hopefully it doesn't get that chaotic, but I see what you mean. It's definitely a very different way of thinking about the soul.
So no pressure, but walk us through it. What exactly are these 7 soul bodies? And what are they doing in there anyway?
So the text uses a bunch of different terms, which doesn't make it easy, but they seem to roughly line up with the idea of chakras.
Chakras, like in yoga and energy healing and all that.
That's the one.
Okay, I'll be honest. I've always found chakras a little, I don't know, mystical and confusing.
Well, think of them as these energy centers, right? Swirling vortices of energy, and each one is connected to different parts of your being.
Different parts. Like what?
So you've got your physical body, obviously, but then you've also got your emotional self, your mental self, your spiritual self, the whole shebang.
Okay, so each chakra or soul body is like responsible for a different aspect of us.
You got it. And just like you can exercise and train your physical body, this text is saying you can do the same thing with these soul bodies.
By toning them up.
Precisely. You lift weights to build muscle, you meditate to cultivate mindfulness. It's all about working with energy and intention.
So what does that look like in practice? What are you supposed to do to tone up these soul bodies?
Well, the text mentions a whole bunch of practices. Visualization, breath work, even dietary recommendations.
Okay, so we're talking about making some serious lifestyle changes here.
Potentially. But the main thing is balance. The text emphasizes the importance of bringing all these soul bodies into harmony.
So it's not enough to just have these soul bodies. You get to actively work on them. It's like having a spiritual to-do list.
And a very detailed one at that. But here's where it gets really wild. The text suggests that by refining these soul bodies, we're not just like improving ourselves, but we're actually becoming more godlike.
Wait, hold up. So it's not just about self-improvement. It's about like ascending to a higher level of being.
You're catching on. Okay. And to describe this process, the text uses this really interesting metaphor, alchemy.
Alchemy, like turning lead into gold. What does that have to do with spiritual growth?
That's a great question. So alchemy at its core is about transformation, right? But it's not just about material transformation.
So there's a deeper meaning here.
Oh, absolutely. Alchemists believed that by working with these base metals, they were actually enacting a process of purification and perfection, kind of like a spiritual metaphor.
So are they saying we're all carrying around the potential for gold within us?
Yeah.
We just need to figure out how to refine it.
Now you're getting it. But remember, alchemy is not for the faint of heart. It requires dedication, perseverance, a willingness to experiment.
To probably a really good fire extinguisher. But all jokes aside, I'm curious about the community aspect of this whole thing.
What do you mean?
Well, earlier you mentioned this concept of a church of the firstborn. It sounds kind of exclusive, right? Like a secret society for aspiring gods.
A little bit, yeah. The text definitely hints at a lineage of teachings, this idea of knowledge being passed down from teacher to student.
Like a spiritual apprenticeship.
Exactly. And it reminds me of those ancient mystery schools, where knowledge was considered sacred and only shared with initiates.
Okay, now we're really getting into secret handshake territory.
Maybe, maybe not. But the point is, it wasn't something you just learned from a book. It was about direct transmission, shared experience.
So to really unlock the secrets of these soul bodies, you'd need to find the right teacher, the right community.
That seems to be the implication. And while the text doesn't go into detail about rituals or practices within this Church of the Firstborn, you get the sense that it's about more than just reading a book and hoping for the best.
It's about being part of something bigger, something that's been passed down through generations.
Exactly. But it does make you wonder, who are these people drawn to this path? And what's driving them? Is it about personal power? Or is there a higher purpose, a desire to serve something beyond themselves?
Right, because becoming godlike could be interpreted in a lot of different ways, some not so savory.
For sure. And I think that's one of the big questions this text raises. What does it really mean to be godlike? And is that something we should even aspire to?
I mean, it makes you think, right? Is it about power, or is there something more to it?
It's a tricky one for sure. And honestly, I think the answer probably varies from person to person. Some folks might be drawn to the power aspect, no doubt.
Yeah, the allure of becoming godlike, who wouldn't be tempted?
Right. But then you've got others who might be more motivated by a sense of service, a desire to use those godlike abilities, whatever they might be, for good.
So it's not an either-or situation. It can be both personal transformation and this drive to make a difference in the world.
That's the thing about this text. It's full of these interesting tensions, these paradoxes that make you really think.
It definitely keeps you on your toes. But okay, let's zoom out for a second. We spent a lot of time with this library of the Sons Aumen Israel. But how does it actually fit into the bigger picture of Mormonism? Is it like a total outlier, or does it tap into something larger?
That's the question, isn't it? And based on my research, I'd say it's not as much of an outlier as you might think.
Oh, really? So there are other examples of this kind of esoteric, mystical thinking within Mormonism?
Absolutely. Mormonism has a surprisingly rich history of esoteric exploration, going all the way back to its early days. You've got groups and individuals who've been drawn to the more mystical aspects of the faith, exploring alternative interpretations, and even speculating about things like, you guessed it, divinization.
Divinization, there it is again.
It's a concept that sparked a lot of debate and controversy over the years.
Makes sense. It's not exactly a light topic. Okay. But I'm curious, what does success actually look like on this path to divinization, at least according to this text? Like, how do you know if you're actually toning up those soul bodies correctly? What are the signs?
Well, the text does mention certain milestones, transformations that supposedly happen as you progress.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Okay, so it talks about things like heightened intuition, increased awareness, and even the ability to access hidden knowledge.
So it's not just a feeling. There are actual tangible changes that are supposed to occur.
That's what the text claims anyway. But, and this is important, it also stresses the importance of not getting too caught up in chasing after these abilities.
Oh, so it's not about becoming some kind of spiritual superhero.
Not exactly. The emphasis is on inner transformation, not external power.
It's a good reminder for all of us, I think, whether we're trying to become gods or just better humans. It's easy to get sidetracked by the pursuit of power or special abilities, but real growth often happens in the quiet moments, the inner work.
Well said.
Oh.
And that, I believe, is the core message of this whole exploration.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? We started with this obscure text, this library of the Sons Aumen Israel, and ended up diving into some pretty profound questions about the nature of the soul, the possibility of divinization, and the whole point of spiritual practice.
It's like we stumbled into a secret passageway and ended up in a whole different section of the library, one filled with ancient wisdom and mystical secrets.
And while we may not have all the answers, and let's be honest, we probably created more questions than we answered.
That's what we do best.
It's that sense of wonder, that curiosity that keeps us coming back for more, right?
Absolutely, because in the end, the real journey begins when we step outside of this conversation and start exploring these ideas in our own lives.
So, to our listeners out there, we leave you with this. What resonated with you today? What new thoughts or questions came up for you? And how might you apply these ideas to your own unique spiritual path? because that's what this deep dive is all about. It's not about giving you all the answers, but rather about sparking your curiosity, inviting you to explore, and empowering you to find your own meaning in the vast and mysterious landscape of spirituality.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.